Welcome to the Plan B CRNA Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA Podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Hello, my name is Bobby Jones, and I'm excited to welcome you to the Plan B CRNA Podcast. In this episode, I'd like to take the opportunity to share a bit about my journey. There have been plenty of twists and turns along the way, as most entrepreneurs can attest to at one point or another. I began my nursing career in 2006, working nights in the transitional ICU of a 1,000-bed hospital. I worked the next 3 years there in a med-surg ICU, gaining experience with countless patients at varying acuity levels. I vividly remember my first code experience, along with many others to follow, restraining patients with alcohol withdrawal and providing full care for patients who couldn't quite clean themselves. These were formative moments for me in my late 20s, and they'll stay with me forever. I began my master's program in nurse anesthesia in 2009. Quickly learning that there was much more to the practice than meets the eye. School was a challenge, but not impossible. It took about a year and a half for things to really click, and then I was off to the races. To paraphrase Dr. Seuss, I had brains in my head and feet in my shoes. And after graduation, I decided to steer myself to a physician-owned anesthesia practice 5 minutes from my house. Unfortunately, I didn't find happiness in the day-to-day of my profession, and my personal life began to suffer. My wife and I socked away much of our earnings into retirement funds, but I couldn't reconcile this strategy with the idea of waiting until my 60s to retire, which never appealed to me. I was living a life at odds with what I truly wanted, which was the ability to control my own time. The financial security of the W-2 life was great, but I'd always wondered what else was out there. Eventually, my personal and professional journey led me to the 1099 world, where I really learned the meaning of feast or famine. While there were plenty of jobs that I could choose to take, I learned that many of them were with unseemly surgeons or situations. And when some of my 1099 work dried up, I lowered my salary and depended on emergency funds. It was during this period that I realized the error of my retirement plans. None of my accounts could actually produce any income for me right now. So I started to look for ways to produce income outside of my anesthesia career. And boy, did I look around. From options trading to wholesaling and flea market flipping to professional writing and editing, I checked out enough side gigs to make my head spin. As I searched for something more, I was able to figure out which ones catered more to my strengths and desires for my own lifestyle. With 3 children in elementary school or younger, I wanted to be able to spend time with my family before all of my kids grew up. Many of the rabbit holes I went down led me to paths that took up a lot of my time or would just take a long time to materialize. That's a pretty common theme with all of these things. I decided to pursue more passive means of income, which led me to real estate. When my wife and I decided to start in real estate, like many folks, we purchased a single family rental. While it's producing income now, it took a while before we started seeing profits. Initially, we were interested in building a single family rental portfolio of about 20 to 30 properties, but we quickly became concerned about scalability. I mean, the bank was a pain in the rear the first time around. How would it be when we got to the 8th or 9th property? I started to wonder if there was a better way. And that wondering led me to apartment syndications and the world of alternative investing. The idea intrigued me. We can invest in the company that does all of the heavy lifting, collect monthly or quarterly distributions, lower our income through the tax benefits of real estate investing, and participate in the upside when the property was sold. It all sounded too good to be true. We looked over many offerings and finally decided to pull the trigger. The process was easy. No banks to worry about, just wiring the funds over and a small amount of paperwork to sign. 3 months later, we were collecting our first distributions, and we just couldn't believe how smooth everything had gone. So we decided to invest again, several times over. In total, we're invested in 6 apartment offerings in 4 states across the US, and they're all producing passive income for us on a monthly or quarterly basis. And this led me to think there are so many CRNAs out there that have no clue about any of this. We're largely told just to plow money into our IRAs and 401ks, leading many to work until their 60s and 70s on other people's terms. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can create a lifestyle that fits how you want to live, not how a job forces you to live. The real question for me at that point was, how could I share this information with other CRNAs and healthcare professionals while also guiding them to the best investments? That's when I decided to create On-Call Capital, a company with a focus on apartment and alternative investing education for healthcare professionals. Over 1,000 CRNAs have signed up for my free educational email series in the past year. However, I couldn't just stop there. While I've been busy creating educational content for YouTube, something continued to nag at the back of my mind. I knew that there was still something missing. Not everyone should have to take the long and arduous path that I did to finally discover what works for them. You see, when I was in anesthesia school over a decade ago, I was introduced to the idea of a Plan B. Early in my career, I thought the idea was ridiculous. If I wanted to make more money, I'd just pick up an extra shift at the hospital. However, as time went on, I realized the true value in a Plan B, which is flexibility. But I've also noticed that these side gig discussions are regularly kept in the dark corners of the profession. The idea just hasn't been accepted by the anesthesia community at large, and many online forums come down on CRNAs who advertise what they're doing. The truth is that we live in a gig economy. For those who are unfamiliar with this term, the gig economy is one based on flexible, temporary, or freelance jobs, often involving contact through online platforms. Think of Uber or Grubhub. This can benefit workers, businesses, and customers from a flexibility standpoint, but it can have downsides due to a lack of traditional relationships between workers and businesses that leads to a lack of benefits and representation of employees. And what CRNA doesn't want more flexibility in their schedule? Many folks work 1099 just for that reason, only to find out that they have to scramble for health insurance while dealing with the day-to-day of running their own businesses. But if you could find a Plan B that fit your lifestyle and allowed you to branch out into something that you're passionate about, well, why wouldn't you take advantage? The idea of this podcast began to bloom when I asked, why shouldn't we talk about these things? So many people just have no idea of the possibilities available to them. I say, let's bring this into the light so that CRNAs can make educated decisions for their own futures. I've learned that there are 3 key components to starting something new: education, mindset, and mentorship. The Plan B CRNA podcast will explore each of these components in turn. I've already looked into tons of Plan B ideas on my own. My experience in researching various side hustles is the basis for our rabbit hole episodes, where I delve into these individual topics so that you can determine the right fit for you. Our Thoughtful Thursday episodes will explore the mindset piece of the puzzle, diving into subjects that are either holding us back or pushing us to further heights. And finally, our Provider Spotlight episodes will uncover CRNAs who are pursuing their own Plan Bs with a focus on tips and tricks for replicating their success and avoiding pitfalls. You shouldn't have to recreate the wheel to be successful. So welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast presented by On-Call Capital. I hope you find value in these episodes. If you decide that you'd like to stick around and grow with us, please hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by On-Call Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find On-Call Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.